Well, hello everyone and welcome to Blackboard Biology. My name is Mr. Chuck Jeffers and I created this YouTube channel mostly to help out my students in Scott High School. And so if you're one of my students, welcome. I hope to see you in class soon. And if you're not one of my students and you've just stumbled upon this by chance, I hope these videos are a great help to you as well. Now, it is called Blackboard Biology, but we're going to have to branch out some and focus on some chemistry and some physics concepts as well to fulfill the needs of my students. So look, keep an eye out for those videos as well. I want to begin things with the first video that you should watch from my channel. What is science? Okay, I want to know what you think about science, because a lot of times I hear students say things like, well, science tells us this, or well, science says, or science has proven fill in the blank. But really, I've never heard science speak anything, because science can't speak. We can't use language like that. We could say scientists, and that is true, because we can't separate the human element from science. It is not its own entity. And so I want to explore in this video some things, not just what is science, but also what can it do and what can it not do. So let's dive in. I want you to begin by writing down your own basic definition of science. What do you think it is? And so I invite you, pause this video, and if you're one of my students in my classes, you need to pause the video, and either in your Teams notebook or on a sheet of paper, however I have assigned that you need to complete this, pause the video and write down your own definition of science. Okay, now that you've had an opportunity to do that, what are some things that maybe you wrote down? Well, some of you may have, kind of referred to science as knowledge. You are thinking of science as a body of knowledge. It's things that we know, things that we have learned, or maybe even things that you're taught. It may be your favorite subject in school or your least favorite subject, depending on whether or not you've had maybe a good teacher in the past, or whether or not maybe you like me. I don't know. But science is much more than just a body of knowledge. It's much more than just a subject that we're taught in school. In fact, science really, a lot of it has to do with methods even. Not just what we learn, but how we learn those things. And so keep that in mind as we move forward. So now that you've written down your own definition, we'll be getting to what I'm going to give you as my definition here in a minute. But first, I want you to write down 3 more things that you think are true of science. Now, these can be just very short phrases or full sentences, however you want to do that, but pause the video and do those now. Okay, some things that you may have written about science. I don't know, some common answers that I normally get from students. They might maybe say that science is rational, which I think they're correct. They would maybe say that science, doesn't deal with things that are not observable. That would also actually be correct. So for example, science is not really going to deal with questions of religion. Science is not going to deal with questions of human emotions. Science, strictly speaking, cannot even truly definitively answer questions of morality and ethics. Those things have to be discussed in more philosophical terms. Science can aid our decision making in issues of morality and religion and things of that nature. But it on its own, we cannot just simply use science to definitively answer questions of religion or morality or ethics or philosophy. It's useful in those discussions, but it is not a self-sufficient a means to an end. And so you may have said science is rational, it's observable. One thing I hope that you wrote is that science, what we do with science must be testable. That's the whole thing about science, is we want to be able to experiment and observe and test things for ourselves. And if it's not testable, then it may actually fall a bit outside the realm of what is truly considered science. So without further ado, let me give you my definition that I've kind of culminated from various things through the years and from teaching science for a while. And so here it is. When we talk about science, okay, what we are talking about often is a methodical yet creative process that leads to new understandings, technologies, and solutions for the good of mankind. Okay, so I would say that science must be creative, because what's going to happen is sometimes we are going to run into roadblocks, and sometimes we're going to run into situations where we just can't seem to figure out the right answers or what we think are the right answers. There's a professor, a research professor called by the name of Uri Alon, and I probably messed up his name, but he refers to it as the cloud. He says, oh, we've run into the cloud. Often we think that, oh, we need to get from A, this is the question we're asking, or the starting point of our research, or the starting point of a scientific pursuit, and we want to get to the answer B, and we want as straight a path as possible. And so often what happens is, instead of having this straight line path, people run into what he refers to as the cloud. So here's an ugly cloud. So instead of making a straight line path from A to B, and he says, no. What often happens is you go and you branch off because experiments fail and research fails and experiments fail and research fails and research fails. And you just run into this cloud, and it's misty and it's foggy and it's so hard to tell where you're trying to get. He says, but eventually, if you keep at it, you might get a better idea, a different perspective, and reach an answer C that you weren't even expecting. And he says the cloud is this kind of gatekeeper, this barrier between what is known and what is unknown. And sometimes we're going to have to be willing to take some daring leaps into the unknown, and that takes creativity. And so in my class, I want to invite you, be creative in your thinking, be creative with the way that you do things. And hopefully we'll gain some new understandings. Who knows, maybe we'll invent new technologies, and hopefully we'll come up with some solutions that better the good of mankind, even if it's just our classroom, even if it's just you as a student. And so going back to some other things here, science is often described as a method of thought, more about how you get answers than the actual answer you come to. So yes, science is a body of knowledge, but more often when we refer to science, we want to talk about our methods of it and how we're actually doing it as a process. And I want to know, is this how you think of and generally use the word science? Or do you more often refer to it as if it's just a body of knowledge, as if it's just this set of facts that somehow speak to us and make decisions for us around the world? And this is where I really want us to get to. How might your ideas about science need to be challenged and maybe even changed? Sometimes we talk about science as if it is its own entity. Maybe we need to change that, and maybe we need to begin referring to scientists rather than science as this broad, all-encompassing idea that is its own entity. So having discussed what science really is, let's think about, what can science do? Well, the short answer is nothing on its own. Science cannot speak for itself, as I've been saying throughout this video. It is a process and in some sense a body of knowledge. Those things, facts, processes, they're inanimate. They can't speak for themselves. So it requires interpretation. It requires a user. It's just like a calculator. A calculator is completely incapable of taking a math test. It must be used appropriately, and things must be interpreted and input into the calculator and get the correct output, which can then be used by the person taking the test. Science can't do these things on its own. So we need to quit referring to science as its own entity, saying, oh, science tells us this, science can answer these questions. It's a process that we can use, yes. So it cannot definitively prove something from the past either. So not only can it not speak for itself, but it does have limitations. We can observe only things in the present, unless we have, video evidence. So this is where we run into issues with some things in court proceedings, in talks on the theory of evolution, in talks on human history. We can only go on the facts, the things that we can observe right now in the present. Scientists who are alive today cannot definitively say what happened ages and ages and ages ago. They can make great guesses. We can make really wonderful estimations of what happened and how long a process took and how old something is. We can do all these things, but at the end of the day, again, they're still estimations. It's not definitive because they weren't there to see it. In court proceedings, it happens sometimes. Somebody's DNA may have been at a particular crime scene, but that doesn't necessarily automatically mean they were the one that committed it. There could have been some kind of scenario that occurred that led to this. So we must remember that science cannot definitively answer what happened in the past, but it can give us good estimations. We can use it to interpret. We can gain observations. We can gain facts in the present and attempt to interpret those to understand the past. So what can science do? Science can definitely be used to learn new things about how the world works, to discover new things about how the world works, right? To discover just so much things. We can use it to develop technologies. We can use it, ultimately, this ought to be the goal of all science, to improve human life. And so I hope that through this video, you've gained a greater understanding of exactly what science is, things that we'll be talking about and discussing in class, and what it can do, and really what it cannot do. And so I just want to say thank you for watching. Again, this is Blackboard Biology, and I hope that you'll tune in for future videos. And if you're one of my students, you really don't have a choice. So I'll see you guys next time on Blackboard Biology.